everybody. Welcome to the Ashen Forge, episode 19. I'm trying to figure out my audio, so please let me know if I am echoing to anyone else. I am, of course, joined by Diggs, Neuro, and Sog, and today we're just going to talk a little bit about, I guess, elements in other RPGs or other games we've played that we'd maybe like to see show up in Ashes, or really any MMORPG. And I think Diggs also has something else he would like to go over. He says for a short while, but we'll see if it's actually a short while. Actually, why don't we just start with that? Because I don't know how long it's going to go. Go ahead.
Well, I don't know how long it's going to go either. And I was going to try and bring it up last time, but I decided to kind of let it go and just go with the flow. So it's Ashes of Creation. One of the major topics that we have, since we don't have a lot of details coming out about the game, one of the major topics that gets a lot of play in the forums right now is PvP combat corruption. And PvP combat corruption and the concept of non-consensual PvP versus consensual PvP. And someone 2 weeks ago was saying that non-consensual PvP doesn't exist and that you automatically consent to PvP combat the moment you log into the game. And my response was, yeah, I remember back in the day when bisexuality didn't exist and male rape didn't exist and marital rape didn't exist because the powers that be said those things weren't a thing and you couldn't even talk about it. And so we know that auto consent does not work because non-consensual PvP is penalized in the game by corruption if you kill a non-combatant. But my post got censored out because you're not supposed to talk about brutality or rape or make any homophobic statements or any misogynist statements. But we've got to be able to talk about these things because if we can't talk about them, then only one side gets heard. And that's why we still have things like Me Too, because people can't talk about concepts that need to be talked about. But I was going to let that go 2 weeks ago. But then just a few days ago, that topic came back up again. The person said again that you auto consent when you log in the game, and somebody else used the same reference that, Me Too, date rape. There is such a thing as non-consensual activities, and that's one of the problems that people have when they're forced into PvP combat against their will. Sex is a really good, easy analogy for people to understand. When I mentioned it to Sog a few days ago, he was saying, yeah, but it's kind of like an orgy. When you go to an orgy, you know that there's going to be sex. But even at an orgy, you don't auto-consent to sex. You can still refuse to have sex. And
I'm not actually an expert on this.
I'm just saying. If somebody forces you to have sex at an orgy, that's a criminal act.
I mean, maybe I just don't know what this technically that would be a criminal act, but I mean, some people, that if you're setting this up, that if you're setting up this event, that there's gonna be stuff happening, and I don't know, what do you need?
First of all, to the analogy, if you're going to an orgy, you might just be an exhibitionist. You might, or a voyeur rather. You might just be there watching. You might not actually be participating because that's how some orgies are. But regardless of that, I feel like Eve is actually probably a better example for PvP Eve, or perhaps even Ultima Online. When you're in the city in Ultima Online, yes, somebody can attack you, and you type guards, or anybody in proximity types guards and presses enter, and a guard pops out of nowhere with a halberd and instantly one-shots the offender in the back of the head, rendering them dead so everybody can descend upon their corpse and try to loot them. If you try to do it outside of the town, guards don't help you. You die. That person's going to kill you. Or maybe you can get away, or maybe you're tough enough. Depending on if latency is on your side and you took the first action, you'll probably be able to get away. If not, if they took the first action, you're probably dead. But beyond that, I also go back to EVE Online, where there's the different levels of security space. I believe it's 1.0 is supposed to be the most secure space, and even up to about 0.6, 0.5, it's supposed to be pretty secure. But as you get down to about 0.5, it starts to get lax enough that instead of there being guards and patrols everywhere, there's a couple of turrets by the gate. But if somebody's really crafty and really determined, they can still pick off ships at the gate who are just in the autopilot in between zones. So it's one of those things that, sure, it's it's a risk reward sort of thing, and that game is just spreadsheets and space and risk reward and everything, and insurance and stuff. But in terms of the way it boils down to consent to PvP, you don't want to get blown up, and obviously there's punishment and consequences and whatnot for people that do try to attack you. But at the same time, you might get into a situation where the offenders are going above and beyond what the computer is ready to throw at them, and that you actually need to call in outside help, outside defense, because somebody has become a greater threat, almost like they've become a boss encounter in the area, which is something I would frequently do in WoW. There was the one of the first neutral zones after the starting areas, the one that's more on the Alliance side. I go into the little elf town and just start killing the NPCs and start killing everybody there until they run me out with a couple level 60s. And maybe they were trying to just be mostly PvE. It was on a PvE. Was it on a PvE server? No, it was a PvP server. So there was definitely open combat. But in town you're expecting, it's just going to be this happy little experience. I can just be protected and defended. No, I'm going to kill your skill trainer. You can't train skills until you get someone to clear me out. So to that extent, I would say the consent to PvP side of things, yes, when you log in, technically you are in a state where you can be attacked. And even when you aren't logged in, the moment you've created a character, the moment you've logged in, and any time that you're logged in, you're basically able to be affected by other players, whether that's through combat, through economic tomfoolery, through whatever, through them hatching a plot to make you look like a fool, whatever it may be. Players can do things to you. But I think that's kind of a little bit of the charm and kind of a little bit of the thing that we're looking for in terms of taking the game off rails. If it's a game on rails like WoW, you're not going to be able to do a lot of that sort of stuff aside from just attacking somebody out in the open field.
Oh, hold on. Let me. I'm going to interrupt. Right. Say, if the fact that someone can affect your character in a negative way, and that is consent, then if you're playing Counter-Strike, you're consenting for your own teammates to kill you. When really, if people are team killing, it's ruining other people's game experience. It's not what they showed up to the game for. It's harming that. It's totally non-consensual. Nobody logs in to starts a Counter-Strike match. It's like, hey guys, shoot me in the back.
But I think it's also the difference. Are we talking about your own perceived allies who are supposed to be on your side because you are locked into a factional system and those people stabbing you in the back? Or is it any player ever because you're not necessarily locked into something that factional and concrete? Because I feel like with WoW, if you're playing Alliance and other Alliance players are screwing with you, that's totally, not in the spirit of the game. If Horde players are screwing with you, it is. And if it's something where it's a factionless game, then really anybody can, freely screw with you to whatever extent they're willing to attempt and that the game will allow.
But that doesn't necessarily mean that people are consenting to it. Any human in the world can physically harm, can stab me in the back at any time. But I don't exist in my daily life with the assumption that I'm just, I woke up today, so you know what? I just have to accept that somebody might stab me today. There has to be, in order for it to be a game, and if we're talking about a game that's also striving to be a functioning world of sorts, there has to be an expectation of what's okay, what's acceptable, and what you can actually do, or what you should actually do to another person. And like Ashes of Creation has built-in set of consequences for killing people who haven't put themselves in a state of combat. Right. So it's already out there that, like, there's obviously a separation between consenting to PvP and not consenting to PvP.
Right.
So along with that, now, in a world like this, the functional ability to break the rule and deal with or not deal with, in some other games that we've been talking about, potentially not deal with the consequences of it, is fine. But these things should become, like, somewhat rare. If it's done right, it shouldn't be... You shouldn't log into the game with only the sense that I'm entering a war zone, where that's what Crowfall is. So in Crowfall, you log in and you go into a war zone. That's great. Yeah. That's fun. You are doing the PvP thing. But if you're logging into Ashes of Creation, you may have things that you want to do around town or around your whatever town has grown up around your node. And if the game turns into, if you're wandering around town and you're an actual player, then around the corner there's always somebody wanting to just kill you, then the game's not going to work.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. And so one of the concepts, though, is that if it was the whole game was a battlegrounds or the whole game was a war zone, we would be combatants by default rather than non-combatants by default. So if you're consenting to PvP automatically consenting to PvP combat the moment you log in, you would log in as a combatant and you would have to manually become a non-combatant.
You would be playing Planet Side 2, right?
Right.
You know,
right.
Or
it would be an MMO. Yes.
Yeah.
Right. And
I guess.
One of the reasons why I like to use the marriage analogy or the sex analogy is because I only like PvP combat for about an hour or two. Once I'm done, and I want to do other things in the game. And so it's not even that I hate PvP combat and I don't like it and nobody should ever do it. It's just I want to decide when I'm able to do it and when I'm not. And also, once I'm done participating for the day, I'm done, and you don't get to force me back into it. So even if we use the orgy analogy, if I leave the orgy and I'm waiting outside at the bus stop for the bus to pick me up, and I have to wait for 15 or 20 minutes for the bus to come get me,
no one should be pulling your pants.
Follow me and be like, hey, I just saw you at the orgy. You were there, so you must want a PvP. I mean, you must want to have the orgy. That's kind of, again, everybody knows that it's not okay to be like, well, I saw you there, so if you're still around anywhere nearby, 20 minutes later, I still get to do whatever I want to you. And so, but we know that the game penalizes that behavior, killing non-combatants with corruption. But my point really is, no matter what side of that argument, you may feel that that's a hyperbolic argument and, too real world or whatever, but we should still be able to have the conversation.
Yeah, we should be able to have the conversation, but there's a reason why this belief of, like, it's, if you log into Ashes of Creation, you're consenting to PvP exists, is because the most fleshed out systems that we've read about, the things that are talked about the most in the game are, epic scale PvP encounters, right? So we know apart from that, we know that there's stuff, right? We've got stuff, and there's supposed to be a whole lot of stuff. And we got, some tidbits here and there about what the details of different things are. But then we've got the real deal, which is the PvP that we know all about. And whether that's true or not, we don't even know, because the PvP, the people thinking about PvP and the people attracted to the game because of PvP are being fed, where people who aren't. So it becomes this like huge group of PvP dreamers who want something, and Ashes of Creation will likely satisfy if it works out for them. But I think this is a good segue into what we're talking about with. So what do we want other stuff to be? So like, what part of the topic of the show that we talked about was, or that we presented was, what? So let's say I'm not really interested in being part of a castle siege right now. What kind of stuff do we want in there? And let's bring Phantom X into the conversation here, because we've all been playing different games and trying different things.
Right. And so I'd like for him to talk about what he's been playing, and then see if there's any. Oh, because I know there's something from one of the games he's been playing.
Well, yeah, that's what started this whole thing.
Yeah.
Because I said I'm about 40 hours or so into Xenoblade Chronicles 2. If you have a Switch, I would pick it up. The time you would spend playing it, it's well worth it. So, yeah, what sort of sparked this? One of the main sort of systems is this idea of a driver and a blade. So your character is a driver, and you have blades that are with you. Now, when you're in the game, you only have one blade that you're using. So essentially what a blade is they fall into a sort of a DPS attack, heals, or tank. So sort of the normal system or triad. But each blade offers you a different type of skill. You just get different benefits from it. And each one will kind of level up on its own. It's much more detailed than that, but you get different weapons. Each one has a different type of weapon. Maybe just a long sword, maybe a big mallet. It just, you can augment your blades as well, so you can change sort of what skills they have, some of their stats.
My understanding, I want you to explain this a little bit more, but my understanding was that like even if you're a tank and you have a tank blade, there's different types of tank blades. So there's like an evasion tank blade. There's a taunting. Is there a taunting tank blade? But what I heard from watching YouTube is that even in the three
they have their own
flavors,
skill trees,
essentially,
and the weapon they use is different. So yeah, not every tank is the same as one another. So I mean, it's essentially a class system that you would see in an MMORPG. What I thought was neat, what I would like to see, and I know, well, actually I don't know Neuro's opinion, but I know y'all's opinion. I actually thought it would be a fun system in an MMORPG where you could sort of switch in and out, level each one independently of each other. That's not to say that you could go solo through the whole game. And I don't know if that was something that got translated in chat or not. So as you're doing this, and if you're in combat, you can't just switch on the fly. You have to finish out what you're doing with whatever you started. And you also, in that game, you're a part of a party. And you can't, if you try to kind of go solo on your own against most things, you're going to die. So the idea is not to make an MMORPG just a single player game. I just thought it would be a neat system where you could collect or level up these essentially alts. I mean, it's how you can kind of think about it, but you don't have an actual character that's separate. But you take on whatever their blade is. You take that on and level up with it. Still in the context of needing a party or a group to complete stuff. So
yeah.
It's just
I'm all about that.
It's a really hard system to explain unless you play the game. So essentially, it is a single player game, obviously, and you can't control the other player. So again, when I'm in combat, I can only control what I'm controlling. Now I can set the other NPCs I can change their blades as we go along. But I think it'd be a kind of a neat system to be able to do, obviously with modifications, but to an MMORPG. But
it's basically it sounds, and that's the first question that I asked you when we were talking about it a few days ago. Is it sounds like it's the main part of it that you want is upgrading your weapons,
collecting, switching in and out, changing your role. Again, each blade is different from each other, but you can also change that blade. So we could both have the same. I'm trying to think of one of them in the game, Nia. Me and you could have the same character. It could be a different character based off how we change that character.
But it seems like Ashes does have something like that. It's just not as robust as.
At my point when we were talking,
Xenoblade Chronicles.
When you pick your class, your class, right? You can change, you can modify. Me and you could be a completely different druid, but at the end of the day, we're both druids. And this sort of approach, you can, if you know as well as I do, when you create your character in typical MMORPGs, and in Ashes as well. Now you get to sub down to one of 64, but once you choose one of those 64.
Even after you choose your 64, you've got racial augments, you've got social augments, and you've got religious augments that also are going to drastically change how you play the character.
But essentially,
in addition to your weapon,
at the core, you're what you are. This just is a system that you can kind of change as you go. It just seems
like saying a necromancer is the same thing as a paladin almost. So
no, I'm saying the exact opposite.
No, because you're saying that you are your class, and that's just not true for in Ashes of Creation. That's not the way the game is designed. But in addition to the all those and all the other system of augments that you have that will significantly alter the way you play your primary archetype, you also do have weapons that have weapon abilities, but it's up to 5. Each weapon only has up to 5 that you can customize and change and upgrade.
So here's what I'm hearing, and correct me if this is wrong. Here's what I'm hearing you say. When we start the game, I could be a necromancer, progress for a year, and then become a paladin later. That same character could be a paladin.
I'm saying that you could be...
a year later, I decide to be a paladin. I don't have to re-roll. I can use that same character.
You could... Well, so if you are...
Because that's what I hear you saying. I don't know if that's what you're actually trying to say.
If you're a mage, then you've got 8 different types of mages that you can be. In addition to that, you can use any weapon, and you can customize that weapon any way you want. In addition to that, you have racial progression that gives you augments that significantly alters the way you play whatever class you've chosen.
But you're still locked into an archetype, right? When you choose,
that's my point.
But you're locked into an archetype the same way that you are in Xenoblade Chronicles. You have a wide range of customability because of all the different types of augments that you have.
But
it's not just that you're...
I'm not locked into an archetype. I can be literally anything I want to be.
At any time, depending.
At any time, as long as I'm not in combat, I can switch in and out.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's exactly what I like about Warframe, and I love the hell out of that game.
So what you're saying is that your character is not. So your blade is your class, is what you're saying. Your blade determines your class.
Correct. As the driver, you're channeling the blade. The blades, you're channeling whatever your blade skills are. I won't get into the lore of the game. Check it out, though. It's an awesome story.
Yeah, but again,
that's essentially what you're doing.
For a single player game, that is okay, but not okay for a...
I don't see why it wouldn't be, as long as you design a game where you still have to be in a party.
I have no problem with the ability for characters in games to be whatever they want or even switch. I don't even have a problem with 100% skill-based systems like RuneScape, where you can learn whatever you want. And, if you wear a bow, if you're wielding a bow, you're using ranger skills. If you're wielding a sword, you're using melee combat skills. And, you may or may not have the ability, the skill level to make the most of that. But I don't know. I like that if there's at least enough depth and a progression path that I can specialize and I can be the character, I can play the character that I want to, and I don't necessarily dislike the ability to change professions and maybe put in time and effort in an MMORPG system to learn a new profession or learn something else. And like in Final Fantasy XIV, you could learn to be anything. You set your class and you can start over gaining experience as that class. And if you've earned the ability to swap out, you could swap out. But I don't like the swapping. And that's a personal thing.
But I think
I don't mind being able to learn other things, but I don't like this idea of swapping what your character is or what your profession is based on an encounter in a game. It just hasn't fun for me.
There's no professions, and there's classes, but no, I don't know what exactly you mean by professions.
By profession, I mean class, but yeah, I mean combat class.
I'm not saying, and I'm not arguing that you should have a system like this where I'm going to point X and I need to be a tank. So I can go change into a tank and do that by myself. And then the next one I need to be, if this is a system, it still needs to be in the context of group content. Everyone could switch.
I wasn't thinking outside of group content.
Everyone could switch to be a tank.
In Rift, people expected my rogue archetype to sometimes be a bard, sometimes be a tank, sometimes be melee DPS, and sometimes be ranged DPS, depending on what the encounter was for the 20 or 25 man group or whatever it was. That depending on who showed up or what happened, they would be like, okay, well, put on your archer gear. Like, well, I really would prefer to not do that. And because once you become part of I was part of a unit that was trying to succeed at combat encounters. It was what we did, right? So in order to do that, I ended up in positions where I was playing a play style that I wasn't really hoping to play a lot, just because of pressure from the group. And I'm not. And that's a social thing, and I put myself in the position because I was trying to do end game rating stuff, and we were pushing for world first kills. Like, we were really at the peak of trying too hard and caring too much about this. But it was what I didn't like about the game. It was supposed to be a level of flexibility. It's built in to say, well, you can play how you want when you want to, and you can switch it up. Like, you don't have to re-roll. There's all this freedom of play so that you could do lots of things. But in the end, it always felt more like I was in positions not playing what I wanted to play, but playing what I had to play.
That's something that I've been kind of wanting to bring up, is that the other thing that I really want is actual role playing. And a lot of what we've been talking about with swapping classes and stuff is really just the combat side of things. Whether you're a tank or a rogue or a caster largely doesn't matter outside of combat. Like, if I'm a wizard and I can conjure food and water, I can't walk into a town where people are starving and save the day. There's, generally not a mechanic for that. Right. That's more like the versatility that I'd like to be able to see. Right. And that you taking the role of being a wizard, of being a conjurer who can do that sort of thing, is not just part of your spellcasting because you conjure fireballs and lightning bolts, but that you conjure things that are good and helpful for people as well. That's a lot of what I feel like we're missing, and that unfortunately, when most of the game's mechanics boil down to the paradigms related to combat and economy and trade, becomes really secondary, potentially even tertiary, then a lot of the opportunity for role-playing and for skill and trade to be a part of that really, unfortunately, goes out the door. And I feel like it's a real big problem with games that are on rails, like, conventional MMO, your Meridian 59, EverQuest, WoW, and everything, in between and along that trend, that it's mostly a combat simulator platform where, access to resources and things, all you're doing is building up better weapons and having more resources to do more combat. Rarely are you actually building something up, except for the very few events they'll have every now and then where they're going to release the next expansion or something. And that's not satisfying.
Along with what you were saying, it's kind of why I was referring to things as professions, because the way that I'm trying to present being something in a game is that, like, if you're a wizard, it's not necessarily that you're the wizard archetype, but that you're a wizard, like that you are, you're Merlin, like that your job, right. That right. what your function in society is a wizard, and you could, and that's what you've built yourself up as. That's what the community sees and accepts you as, and you might also be an excellent duelist and occasionally show up at fencing tournaments and do that too, but you're still known as the wizard, right? Because like who you are in the community is the wizard, but people also like, hey, remember, have you seen that guy fence?
Yeah, well, that's actually the wizard I'm playing in the D&D session I'm playing tonight. He's got I think 18 dexterity, so as a wizard, he's able to throw 2 daggers just as well as he can cast a spell and fight with 2 daggers, use a rapier, whatever. He's able to fight in close quarters. It's just, not having a lot of health and a lot of, natural armor, not the best idea. But yeah, that's actually exactly how I built the character. He's an entertainer. He does like tumbling acts and acrobatics and stuff like that. He's very, very flamboyant, and that's exactly what I like, is being able to have a character like that. It wouldn't be viable. Like, I go back to Vanguard and the idea of crafting a staff of strength. Nobody's going to use it because the only people that use staves literally don't use strength, and so you've crafted a world first of an item nobody's ever going to use.
Yeah, and so when I'm thinking about the differences between an MMORPG and this particular type of single-player RPG, with the MMORPG, we're kind of still, especially fantasy-oriented, trying to recreate, Tolkien's vision, the D&D vision, and you are creating your character, customizing your character. But, Gandalf does not become this great ranger archer. He doesn't become, the world's greatest thief. Same with the archer does not become a grand wizard just because he swaps his weapon out.
Not a grand wizard either.
Because it takes years and years of experience and practice and all this stuff to become this thing. In the type of single player game, it's you are just that you aren't really creating your own character like you do in D&D or like you do in WoW or like you do in EverQuest. You are embodying a character, an already established character. You're not giving it a different name and personality. It is that person. And then the way you customize that one person that you are is through the blades, which is...
Well, no, because to point out... Well, I wouldn't want that in it either. But also to make a point of it is that You are actually two physically separate characters. So while you take on the combat in MMORPG, I'm not saying everyone would be, would be Pyra, one of the main characters. You still have your own identity. Now, not in this game. It's a single player game. That's not what I'm saying. You still have your own character. Essentially.
But I'm saying if you can swap out like that, then
you're still
swapping
a
your class. But you're swapping your class. You're customizing your class by the blades because you are just that one character.
I feel like I can't explain it unless you play it. But essentially the way I see it when I think of this sort of system, and they have another to kind of further build on it that I don't like. As you collect blades, you can actually send them out on missions, and while you're doing something, and then they come back and they gain whatever experience or whatever skills. I don't really like that as far as an MMORPG. And this game is great because it saves me time, but because each one has,
that makes sense.
like each one will have like a different element mastery or whatever. But
you actually brought up something else that I'd really want to see in MMOs is actually having a squad, not just your one character, and that you can actually have your dedicated party of like NPC, whatevers that you can potentially go and play and swap and play their story. What was that?
Like in Star Wars: The Old Republic, you have a companion with you all the time.
I didn't actually play that, but probably.
Yeah, you have a companion with you. So when you're solo questing, like if you're playing as a melee character, you might have a ranged DPS / healer help you. So between two characters, you're fulfilling, several different combat roles. I played when I played Star Wars: The Old Republic. I was an Imperial operative, but I was the healing spec. So what I did was a lot of times I had a companion that did the majority of the damage, and my job was to redirect threat to my companion and keep the companion alive. And I was able to, solo a lot more content than other people because I built my tactic around the role that I wanted to play, and I didn't try to make my character something it wasn't during that time, and it worked very well. And along with this, build a party and go do things. One of the things that I think has been lost in as a feeling in MMORPGs is that what we're trying to emulate is this idea of I have this mission, whatever it is, big or small, whether it's a quick thing or it's a long campaign, I have this goal, and I'm seeking like-minded people with certain skill sets to go accomplish this goal with me, and we're going to establish bonds, but we're getting together as your job is this, your job is that. We've got everything we need. Okay, let's go, whether it's a simple hunting trip or it's, the Lord of the Rings, it doesn't, either way, that's the feeling. And I've been playing through a lot of the Shadowrun games recently, and the gameplay is, you hire people with skill sets to come with you because you have this mission that you need some help with, and everybody gets paid at the end, and then you kind of go your separate ways. But it's built in that kind of episodic nature that I would actually like to see in MMORPGs, kind of like original Guild Wars, where even though everything was instanced at the time, you're looking for people that are around the same level as you to go, or with different skills to go into this area and go search for something, whether it's crafting materials or whatever. You needed to build a group of people to go, or you did it solo if you wanted. But it feels to me like that concept and not just with things like group finders and automatic teleport to dungeon, but with the repeated running of the same dungeon for gear and all of this, it's become much more, we're playing a level of a game than I'm getting together a group of people to go accomplish things. So what I would like to, or accomplish something specific, and I might be the only one that really cares about that. So I need to pay other people somehow. Like, it doesn't necessarily mean, like, I have something that I need to do as part of my personal progression. I need to go visit this master or something else because I need to learn something. But in order to get there, I need to gather a group of people who, may need something there too, or may not. Or I might just need, protection going. So I'm going to gather people, and maybe their mission is they just need a protection job because they need to earn some coin, and I pay them. Fine. But that idea of I have something that I want to do, and other people may have something they want to do, and we get together to go do something together where we're accomplishing the group's needs. That's not just a predetermined encounter.
Hey, let's run WC.
Well, yeah. And,
I hate that.
But at the same time, when you have to build a game, and you have to create a game, there's a limited amount of things that you can have a character in the space do. There's a limit of the amount of different types of challenges that can present themselves to your team, and therefore creating this kind of content where you don't necessarily know what's going on until it's going on, and there's a draw for you to go there, is very difficult. So things naturally become repetitive due to the difficulty of creating content and variation in the actual mechanics of the game. That's why World of Warcraft simplified a lot of the things that they did. There are very simple archetypes, right? The class customization became narrower, and it was they decided that they wanted to make the most entertaining content for this way that things had converged, and that's what they're focusing on. But I think that this next step, and I'm hoping that Ashes of Creation can partially do that with the node system and create reasons for me to get a group of people with maybe a different set of skills, or maybe different kinds of desires together to go do something because we want to do something, not because the next thing that we do after Black Temple is Sunwell. It's because there's a gear progression, and that I'm just playing that game.
What I'm hoping with the node system and the way the node system will help facilitate that is that we have to build the towns, we have to build the cities, we have to build the taverns. And I did kind of like that aspect in Landmark when we played Landmark, but it was a little bit too difficult for us to get stuff built. But like when you wanted to build that theater, you didn't have to say, hey, Diggs, if you help me build the theater, I will pay you. You just have to say, hey, I'm thinking of building a theater. Are you interested in building a theater? And I'm like, yeah, that would be cool.
And
things that
there doesn't necessarily need to be
but what I'm saying is that I'm hoping the building aspect will be what will draw us. Same thing when somebody was building this super huge maze, and they were like, I'm working on building the maze. I don't really want to go out and harvest all the stone and stuff that I need for the material. And I was like, hey, that maze is really cool. I don't mind. I'm not building anything. I'm not a voxelmancer, so I'll go out and harvest for you if that'll help you build some really cool thing. So I'm hoping that those building aspects, or if you want to make a tavern, and taverns are going to be one of the things that gives us quests and hopefully interesting quests and tasks to do, then, I'd be like, sure, I'll go, kill some animals so you can make the food you can cook for your tavern or whatever. Hopefully those things. And maybe we might need to go out together to gather seeds or something like that.
I'm happy to go on a trip that needs someone to be a hunter because I'm an apprentice hunter and I want to get better at hunting, and going out there is just valuable experience and I'll have a good time. Not in the numerical experience, but like I'm going out there because, I want to learn more about what doing this is like, and I want to go experience something different and, come back and hopefully be, whether my character is better numerically at it or I as a player get a better idea of the tactical decisions that I should make while we're doing it. And then maybe later on I can be leading these kinds of things. Whether there's any payment or not, if someone comes up with a fun thing to do, it shouldn't be too hard to get people to want to go do something fun. Yep. The hard part is building a game that lets people come up with fun things to do.
Mm-hmm. But again, I think if you have to gather the material, I think it's more difficult in these games where the towns come ready-made and it's always going to be there, and the NPCs are always going to be there for us, and the types of NPCs we want we know where to find them. But when it's going to depend on our actions for those things to make it into the world, hopefully that's the hope, is that it will give us things to do always.
I just realized people love fishing in MMOs so much. Make the MMO about fishing and the fighting and stuff is all secondary and superfluous. That game would sell.
Yeah, if the different kinds of fish pies or sushi or whatever would give you different stats, and I know
crafting recipes for things.
Yeah, the fish that are by the elves do one kind of thing, and the fish that are by the orcs do another kind of thing. And so it's not just that you have something labeled tasty orc stew or labeled smelly elf stew. Those are actually going to affect your stats.
Actually, even better. That's your actual attribute progression. You have to have something. Every unique thing that you've had for the very first time increases your attributes permanently a little bit in different ways. So you want to try everything, cook everything in every different way, try every different dish, make fermented sauces and put them on things like that. Basically, I guess I want Battle Chef Brigade as a third-person MMO.
I would totally play a true Stardew Valley Harvest Moon MMO. Not this you can play with 4 of your friends.
But the real deal.
Correct. I've played a lot of Stardew Valley. Eventually, I get tired of it's by myself. You get to a point where you have everything down.
I wonder if Hero Siege eventually would have gotten that way. Like if they went the full development cycle with it by the end of it, if it would have almost had a similar feel.
Yeah, but I think that I agree. I think that sort of
not Hero Siege, Hero Song. Hero Siege is that other game.
That's
completely different product.
I think would reach a lot of people. There'd obviously be a lot of people that wouldn't play it,
but people love the food and the fishing and the cooking and that stuff. So, if you make the MMO around that, then combat classes probably matter a lot less than your actual cooking skills.
Yeah, and that brings me back a little bit to what Sag was saying before, is that, and it's probably almost time to wrap up, so I'm going to segue into another little bit of a topic that we might need to discuss. But that we hear so much about the combat stuff, we aren't hearing anything about the crafting stuff. And for a game that's touted to be very open and transparent about their development, it's surprising how little we actually hear about the development.
Yeah, well,
I think that part of that is that when people talk about being open and transparent, that they're expressing an honest and meaningful intention, but that when it comes down to having the manpower to actively communicate, that they don't have people in the roles, right? They would love to be putting out like tons and tons of information, but
I don't think Steven wants to do that. He wants to like a lot of it to figure out once we play the game. That's part of it. But yeah, the other part is not having the manpower. Yeah,
it's that communicating is difficult, and that I think that it's becoming more and more clear with like games that have successful community managers, and people that these roles are becoming more valued by studios because there's only a handful of people with a lot of experience in the fields. There aren't a whole lot of people that can put successes on a resume for handling these kinds of communication with a hypothetical player-based roles. That it's an extremely difficult thing that requires people with natural abilities that aren't common.
Right.
So even though it would be great for Ashes of Creation to be giving us taking time to talk through the details of crafting and talk through all that, and I'd love to read more about it too, it takes a special person to present that information well. And Steven can talk about guilds and sieges forever because he's passionate about it. He really cares about that. He knows that the game needs all of this other stuff, but they don't have like that person to talk about it, I think. Yeah. Is part of the issue.
Well, it's an interesting point because I think he sort of gave the same response as Dave G did about Next, which was, crafters are the backbone of the community, right? Yeah, you're right. As to now, we've not really seen much. Now, I think he said, when we asked him that question, right, when he was here, and I think he said not maybe Alpha 0.5, but 1 maybe is where they're going to actually have some crafting in. So we'll hopefully get to experience that. I think we're starting to run out of some time here.
Yes. So do we have enough to talk about that we're going to continue through the summer, or are we taking a break for the summer?
Oh, what we need to do right now is we need to draw a winner for
We need to do that too. And to know if we're doing it 2 weeks from now again, or a month from now, or
to be determined.
We will communicate soon about whether we will be having a show in 2 weeks, but next week we'll definitely be having Morbus on Theory Forge Chronicles, and that's going to be fun because nobody has spent more time talking about Chronicles of Illyria than Morbus has, and I'm excited about that. And now I need to remember how to draw a winner and 2 winners.
And these are for T-shirts, right?
For Ashes of Creation.
It is the only thing we are allowed to give away at this point.
Oh, that's fine. T-shirts is T-shirts. I like T-shirts for games that I play.
But that's also, I think, if we would step away from Ashes for a little while, we'd probably be able to fill that up in Theory Forge Chronicles, is my guess. But
we do have 2 winners. One will be Gnarl Gut, and another one first name is Colin. I don't have an in-game name here, but we'll send some emails out and get information, and shirts will be on the way.
Okay. So we need to get a drum roll sound effect or a
Yeah, I don't know that with this system, I don't necessarily want to show all of that on the screen because it pops up with people's email addresses.
No. I'm just saying we need a drum roll, or we need a ding ding winner, or we need a sound effect for our
winner. Ding ding winner. All right, I did it.
I don't. Well, I don't think this is still here. Let me see if it is. No, the bot we had, I had at one point had a cheer in it that was, I think, rightly removed. So, all right. Well, we will be back. We will, like I said, contact the winners, but next week we will be back with a very special guest in Theory Forge Chronicles. So, thanks for joining us tonight. And again, we will let y'all know if, while we wait on more information, we space out these shows a little bit more. So, see you later.
Adios.